type 5 is called the Investigator, the Observer, or the Thinker. I describe this as the owl of the Enneagram. These are the people that have the really boundary approach to life. So 5s are ones that often, again, would say, like, anxiety isn't something that I openly experience, and that is because their psychological strategy is, I will control everything, I will keep the absolute minimum number of demands on me, and that way I won't be anxious. So 5s are the ones who are very careful about what they say yes to. So a 5 will say, like, they describe 5s as saying, as though you start each day with a quarter of a tank of gas and you have to figure out how you're going to get through the day. This is someone who doesn't like surprises. They like to have everything planned out in advance. They want to know, where do I need to go today? Who do I need to talk to? How long is it going to take? Who else will be there? They're kind of working out all of the elements, and their hope is that you aren't making outside demands on them. This is somebody who likes to have time alone every day. They spend that time kind of processing emotion. They don't feel emotion in real time most of the time. They're very, very cerebral. They're in their heads a lot, and they're kind of always trying to work things out. Okay, like, how do I come up with the answer? 5s tend not to share, so they have lots and lots of thoughts, but they speak much less. A lot of us kind of experience them as quiet and even robotic at times. This is the person who, if you knock on their front door and you're their best friend, but you didn't call in advance, they might not answer the door. They don't like surprises because they're sort of like, maybe you're going to want to stay for hours, maybe that's going to drain me, I'd rather just hide. And so 5s will say they will hide from their best friend if it's unannounced. They don't want that. This is someone who is not known for spontaneity because a 5 is thinking through every single thing, not about what could go wrong, but about what are the demands. So when a 5 leaves their room, they think, do I have water? Do I have sunscreen? Do I have this? Do I have my book? Do I have that? Do I have this? And then they have to go through it again because the idea that they might get caught out in the world unprepared, that is anxiety provoking. So the way they address it is they make sure that never ever happens. They're very kind of controlled. So that's the type. These are the intellectual deep divers of the Enneagram. So the gift to the world is these people can focus and go deep and deep and deep, and they often have sparks of genius and very kind of innovative creations to the rest of us. And it's very sweet. A lot of 5s will say, I spend a lot of my time thinking, like, how can I be useful to the world? This is somebody who does kind of recognize, like it's socialization can be harder for them. They don't always feel like they fit in, but they really do want to participate and they really do want to offer something. So that can be part of what's going on. The path for a type 5 is to go from this, they call it kind of hoarding and avarice, greed, and it's not greed like they're greedy, but it's more that they don't feel very comfortable sharing because they've got kind of a scarcity mentality. To go from feeling this scarcity to feeling abundance, to feeling like I could share with ease because there's going to be enough, the environment will support me, I'm going to be fine. That's very contra to what the psychology starts with. So when they relax their habit of attention, they start to share more. And just a funny like Enneagram thing, in the Enneagram community, they've noticed 5s are famous. If you go to a dinner party that's being hosted by a 5, there will be exactly enough food. No one will go hungry, but there will be no extra food because they kind of work it out exactly. You know, they're not the ones that just cook in a relaxed way and okay, there'll be plenty and we'll have leftovers and send them. No, it's like how many people, how many grams per person. You know, it's that actually. It's not ever that someone goes hungry, but it's also that there very rarely is something left over. So. When 5s are feeling stressed, when they are not in a good place, they go to type 7. So this is a type that usually is very focused, very reserved. Suddenly they kind of lose focus. They start to spin out. They start trying everything. They lack their discernment and they become kind of just all over the place and scattered. And it's a big surprise to everyone else because they're used to seeing these people who are very contained, very focused, who suddenly are kind of freaking out. So it can look a little bit surprising actually. It can look almost manic because this is someone who usually is managing their energy who suddenly is having almost like a manic episode. When 5s are feeling good, when they feel relaxed, they go to type 8, which is the leader. So 5s have a closed throat chakra yogically, they don't share. Suddenly they step into their leadership role. Suddenly they begin to share what they know, they're decisive, they're leading groups, they're kind of being the leader. And it's funny because 5s will say, I feel like I'm really, using my voice, and then I'll hear recordings and it's certainly better, but a 5, when they think they're shouting, the rest of us are like, oh, we can finally hear them. So there is a little bit of a reality distortion around 5s. Just everything feels more intense for them. And actually this is true even in like yoga classes. 5s are quite sensitive to noise, they're quite sensitive to light, they're very, very sensitive to their outside environment, so you kind of have to keep that in mind. So a 5 with a 4 wing is called the iconoclast. So this is somebody who is 5-ish, focusing, deep diving with a little bit of a creative element and kind of a rebellious, like let me go outside of regular society way of looking at things. They can be quite original, quite rebellious, quite just outside, I would say, is probably how to think about it. Both 5s in general are introverted, so usually you will see that in either of the wings. The 5 with the 6 wing is called the problem solver. So this is someone who's a little bit more scientific almost in their approach. Very mental, but now kind of looking at just extremely rational. So not accessing intuition as much, not accessing creativity, but using data and rational thought. Within the subtypes, in the type 5 there is not that much distinction. So like I said, type 4, you can have 3 type 4s who look radically different. You have 3 type 5s, they're going to present fairly similarly. You wouldn't necessarily notice a difference. The self-preservation 5 is called castle. This is the most introverted of all the 5s. These are people who often live kind of up in the woods, you know, outside of things. These are people who really don't need or want a lot of human contact. They might have a spouse, they might have a best friend, but they don't want more than that. This is someone who's really feeling scarcity, but the scarcity gets manifested as a not wanting the entrapments of the modern world. They want to just kind of be off on their own with their very basic needs and have people leaving them alone, because having people engaged feels anxiety provoking for them. The social 5, the word is called totem. And this is the 5 that is the counter type. It doesn't always look like a 5. It's someone who can be pretty social, and they can actually be leading groups, for example. But it's someone, they use the word totem because, again, the 5 is interacting with people still in a sort of intellectual way. They might be part of a hiking group, and so they're the leader of the hiking group, and they've decided the activity we'll do is we'll hike together, and we'll start at noon and we'll end at 5, and it's completely contained, and I'll lead it because I want it to happen. So they have this thing where they're plugging into the group, but it's in an extremely contained way. If someone says, let's go to dinner afterwards, the 5 will be like, whoa, like, we didn't talk about that. Like, that's going to be uncomfortable for them. And this is someone who is often sort of on the search for the meaning of life, kind of having more esoteric questions. These 5s have to be careful that they don't actually place ideas above human relationships. Sometimes the way they interact is really truly more an intellectual connection and not so much from the emotional world, so they have to watch that a little bit. But this can be a fairly social looking 5, but if you were to pay attention, you'd notice it's in a very boundaried way at the end of the day. And then the intimate, the sexual 5, the word is called confidants, and the idea is that they are looking for a single person who they will bond with completely, who will meet all of their needs, who will be their perfect partner. So this is the more emotional 5. All of the 5s present kind of robotically almost. You don't see a lot of expression. But if you talk to this 5 about what's going on, they have a very emotional inner world going on. It can be quite tumultuous. They're just not sharing that. This is someone who wants that kind of intense connection. This is someone who can be disappointed kind of easily with relationships because they really put people up on a pedestal. And then when the person invariably shows their human traits, that can be kind of like, that's not what I thought was happening. These are people who can be very creative. They can have a very rich kind of internal world. So if you have 5s in your life, how you can make life easier for everyone is to understand that it is hard for them to say yes to a request. So the opposite of 2s, like 2s want to say yes, 5s want to say no. Their starting position is no way, and then they work from there. And it's because they don't really have a lot of confidence that they have what it takes to deliver on what you're asking. So I'll use my older brother as a 5, and at one point I was visiting him like every weekend to see his child. And so I was putting a lot of effort into the relationship, and then I needed someone to take care of my dog for like a 4-hour period, and he was like, no way. It's like, we've never taken care of a dog before. Like, you know, like, it's too much. And I remember thinking if I didn't know the Enneagram, I might be really angry, but I was like, he's a 5, and he's just answering that he thinks the dog is gonna like spin out of control, you know, so it's that thing where there's just a way where The starting position is no, and then you work from there, and it's not because it's not personal, but it's they aren't sure they can actually do what you're asking, so that's where it comes from. So fives are not known for wanting to talk about emotional topics. They're really comfortable in the world of data, information, and maybe something that they're expert in. But if you start to talk to how do you feel about that, it can be a little off-putting and kind of confusing. Fives are not spending a lot of time thinking about their thoughts, and they often aren't quite sure what they're thinking, so connecting to the emotional world can be hard. And this is another one, fives will think that they're being really emotional and really expressive, and the rest of us are like, not really. So there can be just a little bit of a reality distortion. Like, fives can do it, but they have to do a lot of work. And part of it too is, again, there's a desire to contain everything, and the emotional world is messy, and you never really know where it's going to go. So if you engage in an emotional discussion, that could go all over the place, and for fives that can feel kind of threatening. And the final thing is, fives don't like surprises most of the time. So if you are like, oh, and I'm going to kidnap my partner and take them in a secret, like, no, a five, because again, the psychology is thinking, I don't have what it takes to survive. If you do that, it might actually trigger anxiety because they're just not quite sure like how this is going to go. So in general, telling fives well in advance, here's what's going to happen, here's what's expected, here's what how you should think about it, that helps them to relax. Surprising them and saying, oh, we'll figure it out as we go, that doesn't usually go so well for time.